We're seeing a push by telecoms operators to embrace cloud-native technology and to use multiple different vendors in the aim to make their operations more agile. To learn more about this, I'm now joined by Bejoy Pankajakshan, EVP and Chief Technology and Strategy Officer at Mavenir. So, for the adoption of cloud-native technology in a multi-vendor deployment scenario, what are the key considerations for seamless deployment and operation?
Thank you for the question. I think one of the key things that we are seeing as we look at deployments across the globe, be it North America, Europe, or APAC, the underlying foundation, which is the platform that's used for these containerized deployments, is a key factor. So today, the leaders in that space include players like Red Hat, IBM, VMware, Wind River. There's, of course, the public cloud providers as well, AWS, Google, Azure, IBM. And in that context, having the right platform and making sure that platform can support the different applications is going to be one of the key factors in there. So whether it's a user plane application that's handling very high throughput versus a control plane application that's just doing signaling, in both these cases, you need to ensure that the underlying container platform is able to support these different variety of applications. So that's number one. The other key part is, as you have different applications that have different requirements around monitoring, logging, this is a key aspect that we have seen is how the OSS piece of the network management has evolved. So having common OSS tools around fault management, monitoring, log analysis, and especially things around security and how it's being monitored, and having a common DevOps or a CI/CD pipeline that works across the different operator and as well as across the different vendor workloads is going to be key as we look at infrastructure where you have a mix of different vendors that are playing together to bring a solution to the operator.
And what is the relevancy of open source to the telco network cloud-native movement?
So as you look at 5G, I think one of the key things to highlight there is the fact that 5G is probably the first technology in which you have not just 3GPP driven activity, but you also have a lot of open source activity. And when I say open source, it's work that's coming from non-standard and non-traditional 3GPP sort of organizations. You had, for example, in the Open RAN side, so much work that was driven through the ORAN community. Then there was ETSI, there's Linux Foundation, there's CNCF. So you see, and if you try to break it down, on the product side for Open RAN, you have work that's driven through ORAN. But when you look at the container platform, which is what we just discussed in response to the last question, a lot of that work has been driven through the open source community, in particular the CNCF and the Linux Foundation, where the Kubernetes layer, which is the underlying orchestration layer for these workloads running on public or private clouds, that work is actually happening a lot in the open source community, which has driven the adoption of these tools. So the first factor is that as we move towards the cloud native containerized deployments, the tools that become available are more being driven through the open source community. And what that leads to is lower cost of operations, common tooling being used across different domains of the operator network, as well as leading to faster innovation. So where things could take a long time in the past because you were dependent on a single vendor to deliver the solution, now you have products which are being delivered in the open source community, being tested by enterprises, being tested at scale by the hyperscaler community like Google, AWS, and Azure. And therefore, the adoption of these tools becomes more seamless and easier for the operators who are now using these same tools to manage their workloads in the private cloud environment. So in summary, I would say by the open source community, especially in open architecture deployments such as Open RAN, 5G Core, the availability of these tools and the availability of software that's driving these workloads becomes easier, faster, leading to better innovation as we look at the open source community to drive these activities.
You're making very interesting points. And finally, could you share your view on infrastructure-independent cloud-native for telco networks? Is it aligned well with the network as a service model, and how?
Yes, it's an interesting question because when we look at Mavenir's history, we've always been a software company, and our vision statement has been to enable our applications to run, be it 2G, 3G, 4G, or 5G, so any G solution to run in a multi-cloud environment. And as we look at how the operators have evolved their networks, traditionally it's been all within private telco networks. But now in the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen more merger of or relationship being established between the hyperscalers and the operators. And that's because you see more workloads now running in the public clouds as well, where initially these workloads were very focused on IT applications, or billing sort of applications to run in public clouds. But now you see even telco workloads, core telco workloads doing data processing, even running in the public cloud. And Dish is a perfect example of this, where they're using AWS to the full extent, productized workloads that Mavenir has and a few other vendors has as well, running in the public cloud, AWS in this particular case. So for us, running in a multi-cloud environment and catering to these different use cases of multi-cloud has been key part of the Mavenir product strategy. And some reasons why multi-cloud may play a role for operators, for example, in disaster recovery scenarios, rather than having a full data center being built out just to support disaster recovery, you now have the Mavenir workloads run in different cloud environments, say a public cloud, which only accommodates and scales out because it's a cloud native application in case of a disaster. So the total cost of running the network comes down because you're intelligently setting up alternate infrastructure to account for disaster recovery within the public cloud environment. And the second part of the question, which is around network as a service. So at MWC earlier this year, there was this whole open gateway initiative that was launched by different operators. It included T-Mobile, Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, and where this new changes come in is the marriage again between the hyperscalers and the operators. So network as a service is not a concept which is new. It's been tried and pushed in the past generations of 4G and even 3G as well, where services such as location or texting have been sold as APIs. But what has happened in the past is over-the-top players, just Twilio and others, have really capitalized on the API opportunity. And when we look at 5G, where it's a true cloud-native programmable network, this is where the operators have the opportunity now through deployment of cloud native networks, through utilization of open solutions such as Open RAN and cloud native 5G core. They have the ability to now set up the network in a way that it becomes programmable. And it becomes programmable because you are exposing the network capabilities through APIs. And that's where network as a service comes in. And truly with 5G, that is a good monetization opportunities. And Mavenir as a vendor, we are excited that the operators are going down that path because it really requires cloud native applications. And that's where Mavenir differentiates ourselves as well, is in having true cloud native applications.
There's certainly a lot going on within the cloud native telco space. Bejoy, thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and look forward to more conversations.